In its final season, admittedly, Insecure does start off very slow and even seems a little bit rusty. However, by the time the season ends, it is well lubricated by your tears. So, to summarize this season, nearly everyone is at a crossroad. Issa is at a crossroad professionally because the block has grown to a point where she could either become a subsidiary of a corporation, or she can stay independent and work with local community leaders who want to invest and partner up so that they can grow in a more organic and definitely, what's the best way to put it, community driven type of way. But alongside the professional issues and crossroads she's at, there's also, when it comes to relationships, Nathan is a bit more consistent than he has been in the past, but with seeing Lawrence again, Issa's still in that mindset of what could have been, and even with all the baggage that they have, it's still something that they both grew together. And it's one of those things like you don't want to lose out on all that you invested in and let somebody else benefit. So there's always that thought of, now that they're where they are when I needed them to be, maybe we should see this again. But as shown when it comes to Lawrence, Nathan, and pretty much most of these relationships, yes, in a way, they do get better once they break up with her, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean that she should get back with them just because they're finally at this place where they seem like they can be a decent partner. But Issa makes her decisions. Setting aside Issa and going to Molly, what's going on with her is her parents are getting older and they haven't set up a will or any type of means to set up her family so that when they die, things are already handled. Instead, they've been avoiding it. Her parents don't really want to talk about dying, even though her mother has serious health issues that have been hidden for quite some time. And alongside Molly dealing with that, she's also dealing with Torian, who's stepping up in a way, especially as a potential love interest that is kind of confusing, especially since that's been her, work nemesis for most of her time at this new firm. So that is what Molly's juggling. Tiffany is in this position where Derek has a job offer out in Denver that seems very lucrative, and he also has family out there, so the idea originally was they'll move out there, Tiffany will find something new friends, all that, while Derek's working and his family can help. The challenge with that for Tiffany is she is very much about her man, about her family and all that, but Tiffany's not for everybody. So her having a group of friends, not just one friend in Kelly, but also Molly and Issa, and having to leave all that and the safety and comfort that comes with that to meet new people. Never mind the fact that on top of not being for everybody, she's an adult, so meeting friends as an adult is a pain in the ass. There's the challenge of not, from what it seems, it's a done deal of her moving to Denver, but the challenge for her is figuring out how to maintain these relationships that she's been so reliant on for like social and support, and not losing it when she pretty much would just have her husband, Simone, her baby, and hopefully Derek's family and whoever else is out there in Denver. Which leaves Kelly, who you already know, they ain't invested a damn thing in when it comes to a storyline. But I should say they do present the idea that she might have found a long-term relationship, somebody who could be her kind of Derek, but that comes in the very last episode. In the way that's set up, yeah, it's established, but it's not really developed all that much. So the first highlight is Issa not knowing whether to go corporate or go independent. And the reason it's a highlight is because when it comes to Insecure, and maybe not just Issa herself, there's always that relatability when it comes to, especially if you're in your 20s or 30s, which way should I go? When it comes to professionally, should I look for the big name company and go in there and just deal with the corporate stuff, which is sometimes toxic but very lucrative? Or should I go with the smaller place, which may not pay me as much, but I'll have more autonomy, maybe a bit more flexibility when it comes to certain things, and I get to have an influence over what the culture is? And when it comes to watching Issa and including in the flashback, not a flashback, what's a flash forward episode where she dreams of what it would be like working under this water company that wants to invest in the block, or working with Crenshaw, who is a gentleman we meet this season, played by Corey Sorobi from Queen Sugar. You see the two different ways that it could play out. And granted, both are very idealized and don't show the hard work. It just shows the fruit from the hard work, but isn't that what we're all looking at? We don't really look at all the struggles that go to get, what is it I'm trying to say? You don't see all the struggles when it comes to the beginning of getting this opportunity to work at this big corporation or work at this smaller platform. You just think about what the end game is of when you're going to have the big house, when you're going to have the assistant, when you're going to have all these things that will make the job easier, but not taking into account what made it hard to get the damn job in the first place. Never mind keep it to the point where you can feel comfortable in your position. But that's what Insecure does. It gives you an idea of what could be, and a lot of times I would say it even gives you hope of what could be. But even if you want to not even go into Issa when it comes to professional life, you go into the personal life, which will be the second highlight. Nathan and Lawrence, and even when you go into other people like Molly's with Torian, there's always this sense of, did I make the right decision? But when it comes to picking a partner, it's one of the biggest challenges in your life, because as much as there are some whose advice is to date often, date frequently, and figure out what you like, nobody really wants to do that, because, that's a waste of not only your time, but their time. And it's so much... Speaking for myself, I know that as a person, I want to make memories with people. And it kind of sucks the idea to make memories with these people, going to this place, that place, this event, this situation, and then because that person was just there for dating purposes to learn what you like or have somebody, all those memories pretty much go with them. So yes, you can reiterate something, but you can't have a cosign or somebody you could add in an extra detail because they're no longer part of your life. So it's kind of like, yes, you can date freely and date whoever you want, but you want to find someone that meshes well with you. And when it comes to this season, you can see that Nathan is trying to be that person, but Nathan, he's still working through his shit and his own insecurities as a guy. So it's like, I would say the best way to put it is that Issa, when she first met him, was in the same instability that he was in, but now she's outgrown him. So when it comes to how things end with them, you kind of look at it as, it was good while it lasted. It probably had a purpose at the time, but it wasn't meant to be. And then when it comes to Lawrence, as we probably said in some of the written recaps and maybe the written reviews, it's not just baggage when it comes to them. It's seeing the whole arc of somebody going from the person who had so much potential to seem like they wasted all the potential to then making a comeback and finally living up to what you knew they could be. And I would even say that's probably on both sides when it comes to how Lawrence saw Issa too, because he recognizes that she definitely is much about a community, about building up the community, but with We Got Y'all, she didn't have the support she needed to do what she wanted to do, really. And on top of that, We Got Y'all was trash. It was well intended, but not well executed, which makes it surprising that in the finale we found out it's still running, but of course under different management. But getting back to the point, thus far, only Derek and Tiffany have stayed together when it comes to relationships, never mind being a full-on married couple. And granted, we don't fully know what they went through as a couple, since Tiffany follows the golden rule of not letting friends, maybe even family, into the details of your marriage. But when it comes to Issa and Molly, things were different. We've seen every up, down, issues that came from their insecurities or issues that came from their partner's insecurities. But while Molly kind of grew when it came to her relationships and learned from each one, I would say when it comes to Issa, things were different. With Molly, you can see she had insecurities about the past, wanted to be on this timeline, and I think when she finally stopped looking, like how a lot of people say when you stop looking, that's when you find the one. That's what happened to her when it comes to Torian. With Issa, I think things were a bit more complicated. With Issa, I feel that especially with how Nathan is, she didn't want it to be where she went through the worst with this person, and then once they finally get to where they need to be, they're broken up. Because that's what happened with Lawrence. Lawrence was this guy with so much potential back in the day. Got together with Issa, didn't get to do what he wanted to do, so he decided, let's go to unemployment. Couldn't get his stuff off the ground, got into a depression, but eventually, once he's no longer with Issa, that's when he makes a grand bounce back, and now he's everything that she wanted and more. So with Nathan, I think there was a hope that with him coming back to her, and even though things were complicated at first, he was making an effort. It seemed like rather than somebody else getting the guy after she put up with all the bullshit and kind of directed him where he needed to be, or else gave him an idea of who he needed to be in order to get somebody as good of a girlfriend as her, he was stepping up right then and there. And I think another thing you have to factor when it comes to the trouble, which is finding the one, is you don't ever want to like let go, because a lot of relationships don't get built off of a foundation of friendship. It's kind of like, we met, you're cute, let's get together. And the problem with that is you kind of get, if you break up, you lose not just them and the time they took up, but also all the memories and experiences you shared. And with that, you don't want to lose that, so you stick around and hope for better. And I think when it comes to Issa and Nathan, that was the goal. She stuck around hoping for better. She didn't want to lose this person who she held events for and held all these memories with. Just as much as when it comes to Lawrence, she didn't want to lose this person who was there when things were really terrible and got her through it. Or at least he was there when she got through it, or was aware of. For one of the things with baggage is, it's easier when the baggage is shared because it's you and this other person, so you're both holding on to a strap, compared to it's you by yourself dragging this along to whatever relationship and having to unpack it and explain what's this, that, and the third. And the older you get, the harder it gets, because you don't know whether you should hide all your baggage or maybe try to like reinvent yourself by having your representative go out instead of you, which is troublesome because eventually someone's going to find all the stuff you hid in your closet or in your attic, whatever. I lost my train of thought. But the point was, when it comes to what we get this season, what we see is definitely a sense of the challenge, which is not wanting to date around but date with purpose, and eventually find that person who matches you. And to bring Tiffany and Derek back into the situation, it's one thing when your parents don't have a marriage. It's another thing when you don't really know of a happy couple in your family. And it's a whole different when you see someone like Tiffany and Derek in your friend group around your age, and you see them, for the most part, doing okay, and then you're questioning, okay, especially considering that Tiffany knew Issa and them since college, just like, where did I go wrong? How can I find my person? And what are the signs that, even with you being two unique individual people, what can I do so that I get what this person has through this person? The next highlight deals with how it depicts friendships once you're out of college. For a lot of people, friends are based off of convenience. You work together, you live in the same area, so it's easy to meet up and do things together. But once Tiffany moves out of LA and moves to Denver, so comes the challenge of having to really put thought and effort into maintaining a friendship. And even when it comes to everybody else, since Molly and Kelly join up to making a states division when it comes to her job, and then Issa starts getting more and more busy with her business, it really shows you the complications of trying to coordinate schedules with people. And while, yes, we see that, especially in the last episode, they're able to coordinate for major events like somebody's birthday, somebody getting married, the challenge is seeing people when it's not those major events, and be it through phone or FaceTiming, maintaining that sense of connection. And I think the show handles it well in terms of helping you understand that not everybody needs to be treated at the level of a best friend. Like, as seen since the beginning, Tiffany and Kelly are best friends, but Tiffany and Kelly are friends with Molly and Issa, who are best friends in their own separate little thing. So Tiffany and Kelly, they're FaceTiming. Kelly makes sure to be a good godmother to Simone and handle all that stuff. Kelly and Molly, technically Kelly and Molly you can consider closer than ever since they're working together now, and also because in this season Kelly really helps when it comes to getting Molly's parents to do their estate will and stuff like that. But ride or die, it's pretty much Molly and Issa, and there's a scene in the last episode dealing with how, even if it is just on a friend level, nothing romantic, how Issa has loved Molly through her worst, that it really helps you understand and also appreciate not just the friendships on this show, but your own friendships, especially the people who, sort of piggybacking off what we said with the relationship topic in the last highlight, how people stuck with you despite everything that they've gone through, or else you put them through, and how they don't just know you at your best after you went through everything, but they knew you at your worst, and they still stuck around. They still were by your side, and even with the best of friendships, supported you hands-on instead of giving you just advice and kept moving on with their lives. Stepping aside from Kelly, Tiffany, Molly, and Issa for a second and focusing on Lawrence, I feel like we have to appreciate the struggle of him trying to co-parent with Condola. Mainly in that it gave us a baby mama, baby daddy type of issue without making it ghetto. For this, that issue that, let's start at the beginning of this story. Lawrence did not want a child with Condola, but Condola, because of her last relationship, had issues with conceiving and possibly having a child, so getting rid of Elijah was not an option. So in a way, you understand how a lot of relationships kind of start and why they're complicated. Or even rather, I should say, how a lot of co-parenting situations start and are complicated. The father did not want the child, did not attempt to have the child be conceived, but powerless in the situation, so mother made the decision to have the child, and now here you are. Now, luckily for Lawrence, Condola wasn't about child support and all that type of stuff, but she also wasn't prepared for Lawrence to be an active role whatsoever in her son's life. And because of that, you can see when it comes to her family, her sister, played by Keke Palmer, got a side-eye for Lawrence from the start, which causes issues. Her mother's a little bit more, trying to be open to the idea, but you can see from the beginning there's a lack of communication with how to handle the child, accountability for their health, communication is a major issue, and it really just pushes all the things that when it comes to co-parenting you have to work on, hopefully before the baby comes about. And even though it's just one episode and kind of spilled into like one or two more, I feel like it was probably one of the best storylines that Lawrence has been in since he was with Issa and going through his own little emotional thing. And I would even say when it comes to the ending, it kind of made it so you could go a little bit more easy on Lawrence since he's gone through so much. And yes, he still did so many things to Issa that may not be easily forgivable for you, especially if it triggers one of your ex-relationships. But I like to think, because of his complete journey and then how it ends with Condola, when it comes to Issa looking at him twice, you can kind of accept the idea a bit more than you would have maybe one or even two seasons ago. The last highlight is the final episode. One of the things when I think Issa was talking on the Breakfast Club about how the show was written, or rather I should say rather how the season was written, is that they wanted to write it as if there would be a season 6. And I think when they first started the season, that's how they read it. But then when it went further on, it was like, nah, let's write this like a final season. And in the final episode, I feel like we get a lot of things that can be considered fan service. Yet at the same time, it's better to get that than like something with The Sopranos when they leave you on a cliffhanger. For what we get for the final episode is just focusing on everyone growing and all of them growing in a positive direction. Issa grows in terms of finding and deciding on who between Nathan, Lawrence, and of course all the other men that she's been with thus far, deciding who's going to be the one who, when I'm at my professional best, is right next to me and supporting me, not just potentially in my personal life, but also in terms of professional life, when I'm stressed out and all that, who am I going home to kind of de-stress and get the energy I need to get back into work, or get back to work rather. With Molly, really, it's just a beautiful thing that Molly, while her professional life has always been easy going for the most part, rather except for the whole, pay issue that she had at her old firm, her personal life has been a bit more of a struggle, but I feel that with the way things end with her, you feel that through therapy and through just learning to not have to have such a tight control over things, she finds the kind of person who, when it comes to her person who becomes her husband, there's a scene we get, I believe, in the penultimate episode, or maybe one before, where he meets Dro. And it's just something about how, granted he was high at the time, it's just something about how he handles Molly, who was also high, divulging all she did with Dro and him being so unaffected by it. It really makes you feel that she found somebody that fully accepts who she is, rather than just the title or her job, or even the fact that she's family oriented. Like, they don't just love and accept the parts of her that are marketable when it comes to dating, but also the whole human being who you have to accept, because that is the person who essentially going to be with at both the best of times and the worst of times. Following that, we have Tiffany, who I appreciate her struggles when it comes to moving to Denver and not feeling like she's that connected to people. But I do kind of question why we don't see beyond that. Like whether or not she gets a job, whether or not she actually makes friends out there. So with her, you can kind of see a plot hole, but let's be real. Her and Kelly are the two characters who are part of the show, who are part of the friend group, but they have their own separate thing, which could have been like a web series in itself, but they didn't pursue that option. And speaking of Kelly, she makes growth in terms of finding somebody who matches both her stride and also a bit of her freakiness, but again, there's a bit of a plot hole because certain things happen to Kelly that should be seen as a big thing, but we don't get to see it play out the same way we see Issa's love life and professional career play out, or Molly's love life play out. Which leads to the low point. I'm going to let Tiffany go just because we've gotten more than enough out of Tiffany to kind of feel like her character's been fully developed. Kelly, on the other hand, I feel has been disrespected and undervalued for almost this complete series. Yes, they showed some growth in terms of toning her down, but at the same time, I want to submit that they toned her down because she was becoming a bit more interesting than Molly and Issa and was moving up on who's the most interesting character of this show chart. And in this season, I feel like while she did have an emotional moment with one of the people who works in Nathan's barbershop, it was always cut in such a way where she never fully got to exit being a comic relief. And even when in terms of when she does have her serious moments, like when she's talking to Molly's parents about making an estate and understanding how how Carol and Molly's dad not having a will and stuff like that is just setting her family up to fight each other potentially. All I really wanted was just one episode dedicated to us getting to properly meet Kelly's family, see what she goes through in a day, rather than it being treated as a consistent joke where you can pick up little things where she's having a serious moment and really talking about herself, but that can easily get lost in her doing something zany, eccentric, or uninhibited. And even in the final episodes, when it's revealed she got a man and she wants to have a child and all that, and I don't care that I'm spoiling it because I'm still very much angry at the fact that between the announcement, I believe at her birthday, about possibly being pregnant to a year later when it's at Molly's wedding and she doesn't have a child or anything, so comes the question of, is Tiffany her surrogate, hence why Tiffany's pregnant? Did she lose the baby? Is the baby with her parents? A lot of stuff when it comes to Tiffany. It just feels like if she's not being funny, lighting up the moment or whatever, they don't really value her character. And it kind of sucks even in the final season. They continue this pattern while everyone else is experiencing this natural and notable growth. And yes, and yes, Kelly finding a man who she doesn't want to toss aside once she gets bored of them, or else when they think she's too much, is definitely a notable thing. I just wish we gotten to know him a bit better, and especially if that's the man who made her change her mind about having children, because that is a momentous thing, and especially for women. And I feel like they don't allow her to really go into how big of a deal that is outside of one speech, which quickly gets undercut by a joke about how not only has he gotten her to the point of wanting to have children, but also to do more butt stuff. So it's like, you can't let this woman be serious for too long without having to undercut whatever type of moment that she's having with a often crude but also very funny joke. So the on the fence topic for us is that it felt so slow in the beginning that it didn't feel like a final season. Instead, it felt like they was going to go on to another loop of Issa pining for Lawrence, yet dealing with this other guy who has a potential to be something, but it's often put into the idea that Lawrence is endgame, so it doesn't matter who this guy is. Then when it comes to Molly, there was always this idea that, yes, Torian was looking good in terms of him stepping up, but also we know how Molly is. Something can go good for quite some time, and then she starts saying or doing something that the guy is not in the headspace to try to understand, so it ends badly. Then when it comes to Kelly, well, we already spoke about how they trashed Kelly as a character, so moving on. Then when it comes to Tiffany, it was just like, yes, she's having this major thing about moving to Denver, but it wasn't until like the midpoint or end of the season where you kind of seen the growth beyond her leaving. There's the growth of just recognizing that, yes, Tiffany's kind of an anomaly in the group because Issa's messy, Molly's messy, and Kelly sure as hell is messy, while Tiffany's very put together. But you can see through her not just showing up for their stuff and, events out in public, but also inviting them into her home, into her life. There's a reciprocity there to not necessarily be the example of how a marriage should be, of how a family should be, but oftentimes in friendship, there'll be that one who seems to have it all together, who can kind of be your example, yet also the full story. Well, at least, granted, Kelly doesn't. Why do I keep getting Tiffany and Kelly mixed up? Tiffany doesn't fully let you know what's going on, but you have enough of an idea to know things aren't perfect. And in a way, as much as we might have gone to why Derek and Tiffany had a separation for us a little bit, or into how Derek might have not been helpful in certain ways, you can see when it comes to Tiffany, in the final season, you get a full sense of she isn't just someone that's a friend out of convenience or because everyone likes her showing up because of, she's always going to have that outfit that's worth talking and she talks slick a little bit, but because she has come to a point beyond being part of everyone's routine, but rather she is part of their life. And I don't know, it's just the way this thing. The way this show began kind of set you up so that your expectations were lowered, so that when it ended, it became a real emotional experience. So, overall, our rating is positive. You should definitely watch this, for despite it not having the best start for a final season, and of course, feeling like they just completely undervalued Kelly in every which way they could and just made us strictly a comic relief, it still had a very good ending. And I would say the ending compensated for almost everything in the show, except for Kelly. And I would say the best part about it is not the kind of ending that made an ellipsis where you now want a movie or like one special or additional season. You can feel that things ended in such a way where, yes, a reunion maybe 5-10 years down the line would be very nice to see, but you don't feel the need for them to, like Sex and the City or a bunch of other shows, make it so that there's a continuance somewhere down the line. You, in my opinion, will be very okay with how things end. And yes, there are more stories that could be pursued, but at the same time, it's like you don't need them because Insecure ends at a high point.